here is, well, the Sfas Emes, the first one is based on a teaching in the Gemara. And this is a very famous teaching regarding Purim. And let's learn through the piece of Gemara because it's, kind of interesting, strange, but also gives us a new appreciation for Purim. And I've mentioned this, actually, it came up in the Maimer a couple months ago. So the Gemara cites additional Habbalic interpretations on the topic of the revelation at Sinai. The Torah says, and Moshe brought forth the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the lowermost part of the mountain. Now, in the Hebrew, it's tachtit hahar, which can also be understood as tachas, under the mountain. Okay? So this is a much softer translation that they and of course, according to the simple understanding of the pasuk, they were at the bottom of the mountain. They were, not under the mountain, but the actual Hebrew word that's used is tachas hahar. Or they were let me see the pasuk here again. Besachtis sahar. So that could be understood as actually under the mountain. So Rav Avdi, now you'll understand what Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Chasa said. The Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain. And the verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, overturned the mountain above the Jews like a tub and said to them, if you accept the Torah, excellent. And if not, there will be your burial. So, in other words, wow, so this is quite a concept, right? Because we know that the Jewish people had said already, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do, we will understand. So what's going on? We're not going to discuss this whole piece of Talmud, but Purim is going to come into this discussion, as we'll see. So basically, according to this teaching, the Torah basically was coerced. So Rabbi Bar Yaakov asked on this. He said, from here is a substantial caveat to the obligation to fulfill the Torah. What's the caveat? The Jewish people can claim that they were coerced into accepting the Torah, and it is therefore not binding. As we've discussed before, if there was a business deal and there was coercion involved, there's different halachic opinions in different situations. But basically, Rav Acha is asking over here, this is a nice, beautiful insight into the giving of the Torah, or not, but it creates a big problem, which is if the Torah was coerced, well, then we can say we're not going to fulfill it because we were coerced, but we didn't really accept it. Yes, you heard this.
It's actually don't we learn another viewpoint? Haven't we learned another viewpoint that holding the mountain over the Bnei Israel's head was really a metaphor representing their enthusiasm for Matan Torah? I've seen that someplace.
No, yeah, for sure. So there are over a dozen explanations of what this means. This is a problematic piece of Gemara, meaning it's not, it's hard to understand on many levels, especially since the Jews had already said, Na'aseh, we're going to do it, V'nishma, then we'll understand. So the Jews had already totally agreed to this whole thing in an amazing and beautiful way. So why is Hashem forcing it? And there's the Maharal, and there's Chassidus explains what you're saying, that there was such great revelation of love. It was as if they were coerced. But we're just going to learn the Gemara according to the simple pshat so that we can get to the end of it. Because oftentimes you bring in another pshat, and it's hard to, you can't get to the end really seamlessly. But we understand the problem that this creates. If the Torah, if we were coerced, then that casts aspersion on our acceptance of the Torah.
May I
So
ask
Rava comes
something?
along and sure.
One quick thing. When it says he held a mountain over their heads, kagalgal, what does that mean? That means like a
It's like
barrel.
kegigis.
I'm sorry?
You said kegigis.
Kagigas, I'm sorry, it's a barrel. Now, I heard a drasha, when you hold the barrel upside down over people, and the question also was, why do you say you're going to die there? It should be you're going to die here. So the answer I heard, he held it upside down over them and said, if you don't accept the Torah, I will drop this over you, meaning you're going to be protected from it. But if you step out of it, you're going to die because you're not going to have Torah. You're not going to have it. You have to stay then enclosed here and quiet. Without the Torah, you're going to die. And that's why it was a form of I'll lock you in here and you'll be with yourselves. But
Okay.
and
Now, of course,
that to me made sense in terms of fixing all the problems.
okay, except for one.
Go ahead.
So what is Rav Acha bar Yaakov saying on this? So Rav Acha bar Yaakov asks a question. Kan l'meidar rabba leoraisa. Basically, when you are forced into something, then then it's a questionable deal, correct? You're an attorney, you know this.
If you're for, yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So Rav Acha bar Yaakov is saying the Jews were forced into this. So that casts aspersion on their acceptance. So how do you make sense of Rav Acha's question?
It can still be that you're being forced because you're being forced either to be away from the world alone or accept the Torah. You are being forced because otherwise you're being isolated.
And did the Jews? So that was only if the Jews didn't accept the
Refuse the
Torah?
Torah, right? Then I have to cut you off. You're my nation. I did everything for you. You're not going to survive out there without the Torah.
Okay. So I'm still not totally clear on
If you accept the Torah,
right?
fine.
Fine and good.
If you don't accept the Torah, I
Then
drop it on you, meaning I close you off from
right.
everybody else like an open-ended barrel. It's going to surround you on all sides.
Okay.
Because if not, you're going to die out there.
And why is this dependent upon their acceptance of the Torah or not?
You accept the Torah, you can go free, you'll have it. If you don't accept the Torah, you got to be roped off because you're going to die out there. You're my nation. I can't let you out there without it.
Okay.
It's just a word I heard.
Okay. All right. So the Gemara makes the most sense, in my opinion, just according to the simple pshat, without the
Right. No, but it's still
calculation.
forced. It's still being, you're still being conditions on it and you're forcing me to take it. But it wasn't to kill them, it was to protect them.
Right. Right.
That's all.
All right.
Sorry.
Interesting. It's okay. It's all right. So, but again, when we learn the simple meaning of the Gemara, the best way to do it right now is just without what Chassidus says, without your explanation. Is there a source for this? Do you remember who?
I don't remember. I can find it, I'm sure.
Some other wise Torah scholar. Okay, good. But I'm just going to go to the simple pshat of the Gemara so that we can understand this better. Although it's problematic. So Rava answers. So going back to the Gemara, the simple pshat of the Gemara is that Hashem held this tub over them or this barrel over them, and the way we understand it is that the Jews were coerced to keep the Torah. Well, if they were coerced, they didn't really accept it, and if they didn't really accept it, then it's not binding to us. That's problematic. So Rava, that's the problem. So Rava is going to now solve this problem. So Rava is going to come along and tell us that Hadar Kibluha. So even so, they again accepted it willingly in the time of Achashverosh. What does it say there in the Megillah? It says the Jews, Kimu v'kiblu, the Jews ordained and took upon themselves, upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them. And he taught that the Jews ordained, in other words, the Hebrew word is kimu, that they now fulfilled, basically. They now fulfilled what they had already taken upon themselves through coercion at Sinai. So I think with the English translation here also, altogether, it becomes it's a little more difficult to understand. Simply meaning, when it says in the Megillah, Kimu v'kiblu, Kimu means that they're now fulfilling that which they had already accepted. When they accepted it 1,000 years ago at Mount Sinai, it was coerced, but now they're fulfilling it willingly. At the time of Achashverosh, the Jewish people could have decided, okay, Haman wants to destroy all of the Jews. I'm going to become an Ethiopian. I'm going to become an Indian. I'm going to become whatever, right? I'm going to become a Persian. I'm sure a lot of the Persian, not a lot, but there are a fair amount of Persians who were Jewish at one point. They became Persian, and now they're Persians. And as we see a countless amount of Jewish people in America, fully assimilating into their culture. So the Jewish people could have taken that path in order to avoid death. But what did they do instead? They held fast to their Judaism. They reasserted their acceptance of the Torah. Now the coercion was just the opposite, right? The coercion was that if you are Jewish, you're going to be killed. Well, you know what? They could have become non-Jewish. Not halachically, but practically. So the fact that even under such dire circumstance, they accepted the Torah. So now they are fulfilling the Torah, which answers the problem of them being coerced. Do you understand what's going on here in the Talmud? And the way that it's explained is that basically what it shows is that the Jewish people never accepted the Torah because of coercion. We see retroactively, we can see that the Jews were not because of coercion. They were accepting it because this is who we are. This is ours. This is God's gift to us, and we accept it willingly. There was also a coercion involved, right? But that wasn't, the coercion was, as we say, a zayt kazach. It was a side issue. It was a side thing. So basically, we see here an amazing idea in the acceptance of the Torah. And now we're going to go back to what the Sfas Emes explains. Just to clarify with everyone, the discourse that I had sent out to you today, it got a little too Kabbalistic. So I'm going with the Sfas Emes on the Megillah. So the Sfas Emes explains here. Yes, Yisrael, please.
From a practical viewpoint, when you look at the scenario from Kriyas Yam Suf, and the joy and the clearly Bnei Israel understood that Hashem was the entire motive force for saving them from the Mitzrayim, and that they would with the shear at the Yam, they didn't need to be coerced. They were so ebullient, so joyous. Not to say that there weren't some dissenters, but then again, even later on, as they approached Sinai, the business with Amalek, and so they saw multiple multiple benefits from accepting the divine from Hashem. So the idea of coercion really doesn't seem to fit the emotional characteristics of Bnei Israel at the time.
Sure, exactly. Exactly. And that's why many commentators give various explanations on what this really meant. What was the deeper idea here, including what Isaac just shared with us and what you shared with what Chassidus says about it. So it's a, it is a very surprising piece of Talmud. But the upshot of it is that Purim was the final fulfillment of the Torah, you see. That's the good news. So on Purim, the Bnei Yisrael re-accepted the Torah. It also says, Kimu v'kiblu, by the way, that the Jews kept and they now re-accepted. The kiblu is written in the Megillah, Kuf Beis Lamed, without a vav. The Alter Rebbe points out that is because it's kibel, he accepted in the singular, in similitude to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, where all the Jewish people had been as one, like one person with one heart. So just like at Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, all the Jews were totally united. In the story of Purim, also, all of the Jews were totally united, and thus we are now we are experiencing a re-accepting of the Torah, right? It's a whole re-accepting of the Torah now in the days of Purim. All right. Now let's see the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes was Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib of Gur. He was, I think, the first Gerer Rebbe. I'm not sure how they count the Rebbes. I mean, you could count his grandfather, the Chidushei Harim, as the first Gerer Rebbe. I guess then he would be maybe the second Gerer Rebbe. So his grandfather was the Chidushei Harim.
He was the third. Sorry.
He was the third.
The third.
So
and his grandfather, the famous story where his grandfather was in shul and on Yontif was pleading with the Hasidim, we have to pay attention this year to the Ana Hashem. And then the Hasidim started. Was he talking about Ana Hashem Hoshiana or Ana Hashem Hatzlichana? There's a big argument. Which one's he talking about? And he was 8 years old, and he said, no. Ana Hashem ki ani avdecha. So he was talking about a whole different Ana Hashem, the one with the hey, not the aleph.
That's not about what Hashem is doing for us, but about what we're doing for Hashem.
That's all. Sorry, that's my only Gerer Vart.
No, that's very beautiful, right? Because everyone just went to the Ana Hashem of what Hashem does for us. Either he saves us or he makes us successful. But the Ana Hashem, please Hashem, because I'm your servant, that's about what I do for Hashem. I'm your servant, right?
Yep.
Beautiful. So, yeah, so he is there, right. So the third Gerer Rebbe, he lived in the late early 1900s. Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib Alter. Okay. So he wrote a beautiful sefer called Sfas Emes. So, and it takes different ideas from around the year. He would speak to the Hasidim and deliver and share different words of Torah. So this is from the sefer Sfas Emes. It's a pretty popular Hasidic sefer. Turning out, outside of Chabad literature, but it's not very different. Okay, still Hasidus. So on Purim, the Bnei Yisrael re-accepted the Torah, as the Gemara states. They accepted it once again during the days of Achashverosh. Adar kiblua b'mei Achashverosh, like we just quoted from the Talmud. And Rashi explains this was out of love for the miracle performed for them. So they had this great miracle, this great salvation in the days of Purim, and out of this great love, they now re-accepted the Torah. And the pasuk states, Kimu, that they established it, v'kiblu, and they accepted it. Kimu v'kiblu, okay, which parallels the Ger Rabbi says, the Sfas Emes says, which parallels Nasa v'nishma. Typically, acceptance precedes fulfillment. What do you do first? First, you fulfill something, or first you accept doing it? Obviously, first you accept it, and then you do it. So typically, acceptance precedes fulfillment, but here fulfillment came before. So fulfillment, kimu, is fulfillment, and kiblu is an acceptance. So what the Ger Reb is pointing out is that kimu, v'kiblu, that they fulfilled it, and then they accepted it, is similar to the idea of nasa, we're going to do it, then nishma, then we'll understand it. But here, fulfillment came before acceptance, similar to nasa and nishma. So the Gemara in Megillah explains that in heaven they established what Bnei Yisrael accepted. In heaven they established what Bnei Yisrael accepted down below. So they established, not sure what he's referring to. I'd have to look it up in Gemara Megillah. It'd be nice to have a hyperlink here. But anyway, Tosfos questions why the pasuk of Kimu v'Kiblu is used again, but it seems that both ideas are connected. The Zohar explains the Bnei Yisrael's commitment to Nasa before Nishma is like, this is a verse from Tehillim, those who fulfill his will to hear his will. This means, what does it mean to fulfill his will to hear his will? This means that by longing and yearning for Hashem's words, Bnei Yisrael awaken the divine command. In other words, through our yearning to fulfill Hashem's word, we want to hear Hashem's word, so we are the ones who arouse Hashem to give us the very command. The fulfillment of mitzvahs occurs, but the desire to fulfill Hashem's will reaches above nature, touching the very, by proclaiming that we will do Bnei Yisrael awaken Hashem's will. So let's look at that again. So the fulfillment of a mitzvah occurs. So we know we do a mitzvah, right? Let's say you have a mitzvah, you have a coin, and you
Is he frozen?
desire to fulfill Hashem's will is our yearning to connect with Hashem. Well, how to get rid of that? Okay. So our desire to fulfill Hashem's will reaches above nature, touching the very source of Hashem's words. So meaning that there is Hashem's word and his command. But then where's that word and command coming from? From a deeper place in Hashem himself. And when we proclaim Nasa, that we will do, right, our absolute willingness to do whatever Hashem asks, Bnei Yisrael awaken Hashem's will, creating the divine command, which they then hear and they fulfill. Sorry about that. Okay. So the Or Chadash, quoting Medrash Tanchuma on Noach, states that the reacceptance on Purim specifically refers to the oral Torah. So interesting. So Kimu v'Kiblu. So again, and the idea of the oral Torah, of course, is something that's much more oriented towards the involvement of the Jewish people in creating and bringing about and continuing the law. So that's a little bit on Kimu v'Kiblu. Now the Sfas Emes continues talking about the mitzvah of Mishleach Manos that we know is from the Megillah. The Megillah tells us, Mishleach, that Mordechai established the mitzvah of Mishleach Manos. Mishleach Manos is the gift that we give, the gift of food. It has to be 2 food items given to one person, to one friend. So the mitzvah of giving Mishleach Manos aims to foster great love amongst the Jews. The Medrash explains that Mordechai referred to as Yehudi, and the Sfas Emes actually says a language here. He says Yehudi, and in the Medrash it says Yechidi, the oneness, the singular. So basically the idea of the Yehudi is connected, associated with being Yachid. I haven't seen the Medrash, but we know that a Hey is interchangeable with the Ches. The Hey and Ches come from the same place in the throat, and they're interchangeable. So from Yehudi you get to Yichudi, which is the idea of the singular, which is bringing out the singularity of the Jewish people. And this is, of course, the principle of you shall love your fellow like yourself, meaning that when a person connects to the inner life force where all Bnei Israel are united, they will naturally love their fellow Jew. This is a concept we learned at great length in the Maimer of Mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. That basically, when you realize, when you think about it, that we are all actually one person and sourced in one, not just one family, but truly one entity. In Hashem's eyes, He looks at all of us as one, totally one entity. And we get to that place of understanding and accepting that we're all one entity. Then you have to have Avos Yisrael. There can be no other way. So they will naturally love their fellow Jew. Now Rashi explains, what is your fellow man? This also refers to Hashem. He explains this on the story with Hillel. When the prospective convert comes to Hillel and says, I want to learn the entire Torah on 1 foot, he says, okay, what you don't want done to yourself, don't do to others. That's the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn the commentary. Another difficult Gemara. Another difficult Gemara. So how can you say that what you don't want done to yourself, don't do to others, is the entire Torah? If you want to say that that's the source for all of the mitzvahs, interpersonal mitzvahs between people, right? Okay, I can understand that. That would be right. What you don't want done to yourself, don't do to others. That would be a very good guiding principle for the mitzvahs of don't oppress other people, don't hurt their feelings, help people out when they need tzedakah, and all of the mitzvahs of gemilas chasad, of doing kindness to other people and loving your fellow, right? All of these things that makes perfect sense regarding this. But what about putting a mezuzah on my door? What about offering korbanos on the mizbeach? What about keeping Shabbos? What does that have to do with what you don't want done to yourself, don't do to others? So most of the mitzvahs of the Torah would not be included in that aphorism. You know what Rashi says? One of the commentaries that Rashi brings on this is that Reacha, your friend, is Hashem. Hashem is your friend. Beautiful commentary. I mean, now, of course, the difficulty is understanding Hashem is my friend. That's not usually how we refer to Hashem, but Rashi, in his inimitable way, brings the pasuk to show it. Reacha v'rea avicha, your friend and the friend of your father. Basically, he was good friends with the Avis, with the forefathers. Anyway, without getting into that and what that really means, but the point is, Rashi explains that your fellow man also refers to Hashem, emphasizing that in the source of inner life force, everything is one. Because Reacha, your friend, that is the idea of everything is, it's all reus, it's all togetherness. And when we're talking about the true source of inner life force of Hashem, we're all connected. This is a very big idea, and I think one that we don't think about frequently enough. I speak about it in my book, the chapter on the Shema, one for all for one. And understanding when we're talking about the oneness of Hashem in the world, that means that we are all part of that oneness. Everything is unified within Hashem. Is it that we don't exist? Okay, that's one way of looking at it. We don't exist. Okay, but I'm here. And if I don't exist, then how can I love Hashem? And the pasuk continues after Shema, it says, and you shall love Hashem your God, right? But really, what this oneness means, all part of Hashem, we are all incorporated within Hashem, and in the source of life, we're all together in this. Maybe we don't have a speaking part. What do I mean? Maybe we're not, I don't have my ego. So yeah, we have to give up our ego. We have to come to, we're at that point, we're totally incorporated within Hashem. So a lot of the things that we identify with ourself are not there, but our true self is totally part of Hashem. And this is the point, I think, that the Sfas Emes is making here, that in this great oneness, we are all united with Hashem. Everything is one. And Mordechai represented all of Klal Yisrael, and through love, he united them by bringing merit to Bnei Yisrael. So it was the love of Mordechai, that he loved all of the Jewish people, and he loved Hashem, that through this love, he was able to bring everything all together. A Yehudi is called one, Yehudi, right? Singular, because they are connected to this inner life force, the source of unity. I would say perhaps that this could also be associated with the fifth and most profound level of the neshama called Yechida, right? The Yechida of the neshama, that is our very essence. All right, so that's a little bit about Mishleach Manos. So Mishleach Manos, of course, is all about advancing the idea of Avas Yisrael. It's an interesting thing. What would you say would be, if you have Avas Yisrael, so you have the mitzvah of giving gifts to the poor, right? Isn't that Avas Yisrael? Isn't that helping somebody out who needs it? And Avas Yisrael, why do you need giving food gifts on top of that? What does it add that you don't already have with Matanas Levyanim? What would you say? Isaac. You must have an insight. Reb David, Moshe, Yisrael's stepped away. Or anybody, speak up if you have an idea. Do you understand my question?
I'm going to Aventura with my rolling wheelchair and have this stashed away.
So I think that when you're giving a gift to the poor,
Right. Well, I'm sorry. One was because of an expressed need.
Right.
And here it's just b'chotshi. You're
That's
giving it to him. Why are you giving it to him? Because you're my friend.
right.
And that's it.
Right. So you could give to a poor person, even if there's no particular love. He has a need, and I want to help him out because I'm a good person.
Well, it's different. You're responding to a need.
You're responding to a need.
I mean, here you're also responding to a need, but it's not, obvious.
Right.
There's the need for both of you to connect.
So when there's not a need, the idea of loving of your fellow is underscored. Yeah, good point. Okay. So the pasuk says in the Megillah, and they stand to save their lives, and to save their lives. What is that? That's Esther 9:15. I like to see it in the Hebrew. Vayamdu chapter 9, verse 15. Vayikalu haYehudim asher b'Shushan gam yemar v'zalach Adar. Nikhalu v'amoid al nafsham. Okay, it's verse 16. So the rest of the Jews in the king's provinces likewise mustered. So Nikhalu, they gathered together. V'amoid al nafsham. So it says, and he stood for his life. He stood up for his own life. But if they gathered, then it should say they gathered and they stood up for their own life. Why does it say they gathered and he stood up for his own life? It should have said in the Hebrew, Nikhalu vayamdu al nafsham. Not v'amod, and he stood in the singular. So the Sfas explains, and they stand to save their lives, uses a singular expression similar to how Bnei Yisrael were referred to as 70 souls in the singular when serving Hashem, who was one. So it says that the Jewish people, when they came to Egypt, it says, Kol Nefesh. Every Nefesh, the entire Nefesh of the Jewish people. It doesn't say the Nefashot, the souls, the people in the plural. It says Kol Nefesh, the entire person was 70. The Chidushei Harim explains the unity at Har Sinai expressed as Vayichan was a preparation for receiving the Torah. Similarly, on Purim, this unity helps us to reaccept the Torah. So, like I said above, the Alter Rebbe on a different part of the Megillah. So, just like at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, a prerequisite was the absolute unity of the Jewish people. So, at the time of Purim as well, you had this great, amazing unity of the Jewish people, and that enabled them to reaccept the Torah, and that's brought out by the fact that it says that they gathered together and he stood up for his life, meaning the entire Jewish person as they stood as one entity. And a similar similarity with the giving of the Torah, the Chidush Haram explained that the gathering of Bnei Yisrael, says Nikalu, they gathered together to save themselves on Purim, parallels the gathering commanded by Hashem when receiving the Torah. That's actually, the parsha of Vayakel, and Moshe gathered together the Jewish people. This gathering was marked by self-sacrifice. So let me just see if I have the right pasuk here for the Torah. Hakel li, okay. What's the Hakel li es ha'am hazeh? I'm not sure where the Hakel li is. I should look it up. Let me. So in Deuteronomy, it describes what was going on the day that you stood before Hashem in Chorev, right? So there we see in the book of Devarim where it talks about the Torah, when the Torah was given, Moshe used the terminology of Hakel, and here also Nikalu, they gathered together. But here, by the story of Purim, this gathering was marked by self-sacrifice. The Jews were willing to give they were willing to give up their life to keep the Torah. That's what was happening in the story of Purim. This gathering was marked by self-sacrifice. The annihilation of Amalek requires such self-sacrifice, where one nullifies themselves to the source of the life force. We have to become reincorporated, right? That's the idea. I mean, what is the idea of this Kiddush Hashem, of this willingness to give up our life? In Judaism is that really we're not giving up our life. We are transferring our life to the higher life source and life force. We are becoming reincorporated in an absolute sense. That's the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, of giving up our life.
1 minute.
Yes, please.
Mesiras Nefesh, they were all willing to die to be from a Yidden. I didn't think so, because they weren't willing to die to be from a Yidden. They were being killed for being Yidden from the outside.
Right.
They were rescued.
Right,
It wasn't like they were willing to fight. I mean, yeah, they were, I guess, because the way the edict was turned around, it was that we were allowed to defend ourselves. So okay, yeah.
Right. We weren't sure how it turned out,
I'm just saying that to me it seems the majority of Jews at that time living in that strange environment, especially spread out 127 different countries, customs, holidays, and everything else. It wasn't that we were all Hasidim at the time. We were chosen. We did the fast. We did the worrying. We thought about it, and we, I guess, accepted the fact that we were Jews and eventually developed some kind of pride in it. But to say it was your typical Mesiras Nefesh, bow down or be killed, I don't see it that way. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, first of all, I should let the Ger Rebbe correct you.
Okay, it's an honor.
It's an honor, right, to be corrected by the Ger Rebbe. But
the Ger Rebbe?
I'm gonna share with you, but that's what he's saying, right? It's basically accepted in Hasidic writings and other writings too. I don't have them off the top of my head. But in Hasidic writings, the miracle of Purim was a miracle of Mesiras Nefesh. Now, in the general way we look at Purim, we say Hanukkah, the Jews, was a battle against Yiddishkeit, and Jews had self-sacrifice to keep Yiddishkeit, to keep Judaism. And Purim was that everybody was going to be killed. The Alter Rebbe says very clearly in Torah Or, he states as follows, that had the Jewish people decided to become not Jewish, the edict would not apply to them. It only applied to Yehudim, which is different than Bnei Yisrael, Am Yisrael, what you are only if you choose to be. The Yehudi, in this particular context, was the person who chose to be a Yehudi.
You are right. Where's it? I wouldn't say proudly, but where's it? Yeah.
This is Dr. Rebbe's take on the story in the Megillah. And you're right, it's not apparent from the story or even the Midrashim necessarily. It's not clear. It seems like no matter what, the Jews were going to be killed.
I mean, what was the story when they talk about the Avera of the first feast from Achashverosh?
Right.
They talk about how all the different ways that they sinned. They sat there celebrating while Achashverosh wore the Choshen and the tzit, no, I don't know if the tzit, they had the tzits, but of the Kohen Gadol,
Why wouldn't
mocking him, making fun, and they were partying with him. Doesn't sound like, Satmar Hasidim to me.
Well, you're talking about before the decree.
I'm talking about where they were.
There's no question. So, in other words, the story of Purim was a story of Jewish revival.
Right. Yeah.
Now, it was revival because Judaism was not very strong there, as you're pointing out. If you look at the beginning of the story, the Jews were there, and as the Talmud says, right, they were.
As the Gemara talks about it,
because they nanu misuda shel zaharasha, because they were all having great joy and enjoyment and pleasure from the Seuda, from the feast of Achashverosh. And you're right; those Jews weren't on a high level. But that's why Purim, the way we see Purim, then Esther said, Lech, go and kanois kol Yehudim, go and gather all of the Jews and fast for me. And right? And I'm also going to fast. And there it says in the Gemara that Moshe gathered 22,000, or in the Medrash, he gathered 22,000 children to study Torah, and they studied. And in other words, they embraced their Yiddishkeit, where they could have given it up and escaped.
Yep.
So that was the Mesiras Nefesh.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the Rebbe continues. The Sfas continues here. So what was the idea of this sacrifice? So the annihilation of Amalek requires self-sacrifice, where one nullifies themselves to the source of the life force, right? That is Hashem himself. The 13th of Adar, a day of gathering, symbolizes this necessary unity and dedication. So that was which 13th of Adar was that? That was the day that Haman had chosen to wipe out the Jewish people. Let's see. So a person has to rise up to the level of the essential self and soul and source of life, which is higher than your living soul. And in that place, Amalek has no mention there. This translation leaves a lot out. All right, so the 13th of Adar was the day that was chosen, right? And the 13th of Adar for us, that becomes the day of Tainus Esther. That was the day when all the action happened. Very interestingly, he's talking here about it being all about the oneness of the Jewish people, the oneness of the Jews with Hashem, and willing to give up our life for Hashem. So Yud Gimel is the gematria of Echad, the word one. Echad, Aleph, Ches, Dalet, adds up to 13. So the 13th of Adar, a day of gathering, symbolizes necessary unity and dedication. To fully eradicate Amalek, one must connect deeply to the source of life, beyond the soul's realm, where Amalek has no memory or power. This is the essence of the mitzvah of remembrance in Parashat Zachor, which involves an inner heartfelt memory that drives action. Unlike general knowledge, which can be forgotten, this deep remembrance is so embedded in one's soul that it cannot be forgotten, ensuring that actions are aligned with this profound understanding. The Gemara in Megillah compares the commandment of remembering to that of fulfilling, indicating that just as actions must be complete and immediate, so too must remembrance be deeply ingrained and immediate. Superficial remembrance, which can be forgotten, is not sufficient. True remembrance is akin to action, where it's fully integrated into one's being. And this concept is similar to juxtaposing the blessing of Geula to Tefillah. Funny that was going to be the discourse that I was going to study today, talking about this. I can't escape this notion. So juxtaposing Geula redemption to Tefillah, symbolizing the elevation to a level above one's soul where Amalek has no influence. Basically, it's not just an occurrence of a thought in one's mind. Zechira, rather, is something that fills the mind and becomes the reality of who you are. It's like remembering who you are after amnesia. It's that kind of remembering where now that remembrance is going to put you on a whole different trajectory in life. And that's the Zachor, where you rise up to the truth of how we are essentially connected to Hashem above this physical body. That's more important than my, than my meal, than my food, than my, all of my various creature comforts of life, my ego. Remembering who we are here, fixing it into action so that we remember who we are, and this is now going to drive the truth of our life. But that has to do with going back to the essence, right? To the essential soul, the way that we are essentially connected to Hashem. All right.
You know what's
do you have any
scary?
questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll tell you what's scary. Along these lines, think of where Jews in America are, and we do our work to do kiruv. If we aren't much more successful, Hashem has other means of doing it, Chalila. And Rahman al-Islam, you see what's going on now with Jew hate and Israel hate and everything else. It's going to be interesting if and when some mamzer gets elected and decides to go against us. It's going to make a lot of from Eden afterwards. So.
Leitakum pamayim tzara is what we say. And we certainly never wish that approach. The Rabbi and many other greats have given us to draw Jews closer to Yiddishkeit. And it is having an effect. It is an impact, to the numbers that we would think and assume, and no, but
it's waking assimilated Jews up as to what's going on. They're looking at their kids. This is not in Harlem somewhere. This is the most elite universities in the country.
Why are who are we left over from? So most of the time we think what we're called the She'eris HaPleita, the remnant leftovers.
Right.
Right. The escape, the remnant that has escaped, right? What have we escaped? Well, we escaped the Holocaust.
The other Churban's. Yeah.
We escaped.
And before that in Russia.
The ground. You want to know what we escaped more than that? As much as all of the people who wanted to kill us? What we escaped is our own assimilation.
True.
Before Nazism and even before the Bolshevik Revolution, how many Jewish people decided to become socialist?
Well, they were running. Yeah, well, that's why Victor Miller in his book talks about Hashem's workings. If you don't want to do it my way, fine. But that he felt this is all siyata d'shmaya. Too many Jews were running away or mixing in or getting comfortable with the Goyim. That's the problem. Even we are very assimilated. There are concepts that we would take for granted that our Zaydis could never even imagine confronting a question like that, as from as we are, whatever I think I'm from. But it's hard. Hashem wants 100%. That's the point. That's the key point in all of these stories. And he is. He's close. If you look for him, you see him, and you find him, and you thank him constantly for every good thing you have. But yeah.
All right, sorry about that. I guess I'm not supposed to say bad things about the Jewish people. So we should all do teshuvah. I wish everyone a very freilich and
We are.
Purim.
We are.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.